Hello everybody, welcome to the CSS3 course. In this video, I'm going to discuss some topics about Flexboxes. So before I discuss this topic, let me show you the web page on the right hand side. So you see there are so many items of different colors, and I'm going to introduce the Flexbox topics one by one by using the appropriate headings and the appropriate number of items in a certain container that tries to store all these items. Okay, and let me also show you the HTML file. Okay, it simply tells you the number of divisions to use, and inside such divisions, how we put the items into each of the divisions. So because of my content to talk about in this video, I have a number of divisions in order to help you understand as many ideas coming from the Flexboxes as possible. So that is the HTML file, and also I prepared the CSS file corresponding to the web page on the right hand side. So you see I have got some divisions, and I also got some decorations of my items inside each of the containers. So that's why you can see different colors corresponding to different items in different portions of my web page. Okay, and in the course of my discussion, I'm going to set up the Flexbox properties and the corresponding values so that you're able to learn how to make the Flexboxes according to the rules and the ideas given by the Flexbox properties. Okay, so you see I'm going to decorate many of the items in the ways that I showed you now. And at the end, I also want to discuss a topic called the ordering of the items inside a certain container, which is an important topic of Flexboxes. Okay, so let me go to the beginning first. So what is a Flexbox? A Flexbox is simply a one-dimensional layout model that stores items, and it allows wrapping and the space distribution between the items. So in the upcoming discussion, I'm going to show you the ways to demonstrate the one-dimensional layout model and how we can handle the wrapping of the items if you want to do it. Okay, so before I discuss the Flexbox topics, I need to set up some definitions to you first. The first one is the main axis direction. So what is the main axis direction? The main axis is simply the direction that you want to put the items in the one-dimensional way. Okay, so if you want to put the items horizontally, that means your main axis is simply the horizontal direction. On the other hand, if you want to put the items along the vertical side, that means you want the main axis to be the vertical direction. Okay, I will demonstrate this idea very soon. And another way to mention the direction of your element inside a certain container is by means of the cross-axis. Okay, so the axis which is perpendicular to the main axis is called the cross-axis. So if you want to put the items horizontally, we can say that the cross-axis is simply the vertical direction. And if you want to put the elements along the vertical direction, which is your main axis direction, the cross-axis becomes the horizontal direction. So these two terms are relative to one another. Okay, and for the left to right languages like English, the main axis usually starts on the left hand side and ends on the right hand side. So we can say that this side is the starting side, and that side shown by my cursor right now is the ending side if I just want to put the elements along the horizontal axis, which is my main axis. So in this case, my cross-axis is simply starting from the top of my elements and ends at the bottom of my elements. when I just want to put the elements horizontally being the main axis direction. Okay, so I'm going to demonstrate it to you now. Okay, so if you want to set up the flex boxes, you have to set the display attribute to have a value of flex. And if you want to determine the direction of your flex boxes, you can do so on another line. Okay, so if you don't want to change the flex direction, you can simply leave this line not entered. In this case, the row value will become the value of the flex direction attribute. Okay, and I can show you some other ways to put the items on a flex box. Now if I choose row refers as the value of the flex direction attribute, you can see that the items are put along the row, which is the main axis, and the orders are reversed. So it starts from the right hand side of the web page and ends at somewhere which is closer to the left hand side of the web page. So in this case, the starting side is simply the right hand side, and ending side is simply the left hand side. So the start and end positions are relative to your orientation of your items according to your definition of your main axis as well as the definition of your cross axis. Okay, and I can show you the column direction now. Now when you put column as the flex direction, it means that you want to put the flex elements along the main axis, which is the vertical direction. And the starting line starts at the top and the ending line is shown at the bottom. So how about the column reverse value? Let me show you now. When you want to do the column reverse direction, it means that the starting position is simply the bottom and the ending position is simply the top line. Okay, so the main axis is now the vertical direction, which is following a reversed direction. So we count the items from bottom to the top. And we have to notice that we didn't change the HTML file. So the orientation of the items shown on the web page is simply controlled by the flex direction attribute value pair. Okay. Then let us talk about another property called wrapping. So I'm going to talk about this one. Okay. And this one is corresponding to this part of the HTML file. So for the wrapping here, let me try to produce the flex boxes first by including the display property. Okay, when you simply see the content on the right hand side, you can see that my items are put horizontally, and you can also see that each item has fixed width which is equal to one another. Okay, so we can say that the no wrap value is the default value of the flex flow direction. So for now, I haven't set up any flex flow direction yet. So in this case, we will use no wrap as the value. So if there is no wrapping, then all the items might be shrunk to confine in the container. So what does it mean by this one? Let us take a look at the division content here. The width of every single item is 130 pixels. And I also include the border width on both sides of the items. So altogether, the element width is simply 140 pixels, shown here. But my container is having a width of only 480 pixels. So in this case, you can expect that the container is not able to cover the areas coming from all the divisions. So you will have 40 pixels which will be overflown out of the container. So in this case, you still see that the container is able to confine all the items. Why? Because in case of no wrapping, the items are shrunk to confine in the container. So when I choose the container, you can see that the highlighter is able to cover all the divisions. And I'm also able to see the effect more clearly by going to the developer tools. More tools, developer tools. Okay, I simply want to check the dimensions of the items, which is this one. Okay, so when I put the cursor on top of each of the divisions, you can see that the division width is simply 120 pixels. So according to the dimension of the container, we already know that the dimension of the width is simply 480 pixels. So you can see that the items are shrunk in order to be compatible with the dimension of the containers. This is the situation when I don't use wrapping. So if I use wrapping, the situation will be a bit different. Let me show you now by including the property of wrapping. Okay, let me show you the no wrap situation first. So for no wrapping, you see that the items are confined to the container by means of some shrinkage. But what about the situation of wrapping? Okay, you can see that some items are put on the second row of the Flexbox environment. So you can see that item number 4 is put below item number 1. And when I choose the highlighter of the container again, you can see that the highlighter has some space on the right hand side, and the highlighter is also including some space that follows item 4. So what does it mean by this one? We can go to the developer tool again. More tools, developer tools. Let me try to highlight the elements again. So for items 1, 2, 3, and 4, you can see that the width of each item is simply 140 pixels. And this value of 140 pixels is simply the original size before doing any kind of shrinkage. So let me go to the CSS file again. So 140 pixels is simply this value. So when I allow wrapping, we can see that the elements may be put on the next line, okay, or on the next row, so that I don't need to shrink the items in order to show all of them out. And let me check the height of the items again. More tools, developer tools. Okay, for items 1, 2, and 3, the height is 102 pixels. And for division shown here, which is item 4, the height is 48 pixels. So we can see that the total height is simply 150 pixels, which is simply the value defined in my container. So the wrapping is able to reserve the total height. So the height will still be equal to the height of the container when I combine all the items together, so that the container is able to cover all the heights of these items. The reason why the height of item 1 is 102 pixels, and the reason why the height of item 4 is 48 pixels is not the topic of concern in this video, because it involves some detailed calculations. So for this video, I just want to show you the basic ideas of some properties of Flexboxes. And I'm going to discuss the spacing issue in my upcoming video, which will investigate the way to calculate the spacing issue, okay? Okay, I can also try another value called wrap reverse. Okay, when I do the wrap reverse value, you can see that items 1 and 3 and even 2 are put at the bottom while item 4 is put on top. This is natural because we do the direction the other way around. So we put the items at the bottom, and then when we have extra items that cannot be handled by the wrap requirement, they are just put on top of the first row of the elements. So that is the meaning of wrap reverse. Now let me go to another section called Flex Flow, which is this one. Okay, so the Flex Flow attribute is simply a shorthand form of both the flex direction and the flex wrap attribute. So let me do something now. Okay, when I set up the Flexbox by using the display equals flex attribute value pair, you can see that the items are evenly put inside the container. Okay, and the width of each item is the same. Okay, this is the property of having no wrap as shown previously in the very first part of the video. Okay, which is this one. Okay, then I'm going to set up the flex flow attribute value pair as follows. For example, if I want row reverse as the value of the flex direction attribute and the value of the flex wrap attribute is wrap, you will see this pattern. So I do the reverse arrangement of the items from the right hand side to the left hand side, and I also include wrapping so that item number 4, which was overflown out of the initial container, will be put on the second row. Okay, and it is put on the right hand side because I use the row reverse value as the flex direction attribute. Okay, the other topic to talk about is the min content and max content. So let me go to this part of the web page together with the corresponding CSS and HTML file. Okay, for this part, I can change the width of the elements shown here for items 1, 2, and 3. Okay, when I use min content as the width of the item 1, you can see that the item is shrunk in area. So how can we define the area of this item? When I use min content as the width, you can see that I can have only the longest word being the width of the item. Okay, so you can see that this word is longest here, so I'm able to use this word as the definition of the width of this item. This is the meaning of the min content. So for item 2, I try something else. Okay, for item 2, I use the width as max content. So you can see that I'm going to make use of the entire size of the content to define the width of item 2. And this is the meaning of max content, because you can see that for item 2, it is this long in content. The max content is simply referring to the length of these texts. Okay. So let me show you something more for item 3. Now you see that item 3 has a very long content. So how can I set up the max content for this item? Let me show you now. When I use max content as the value of the width for item 3, you can see that the length is elongated so that the width is able to cover all the text content. So this is the property of max content. It is even able to override the width of the container. So initially you can see that the width of item 3 is simply confined by the container width. But when I use max content, you can see that the item width is very long, so that it is able to overflow from the container that holds this item. Okay, so this is the meaning of the max content and the min content. The reason to talk about these two values is that we will use them in the discussion of the setup of the items when it comes to changing the appearances of the items. Some situations might involve the use of min content and max content values. So that's why I'm going to show you these things later that would make use of max content and min content. Now let us go to another topic called align items and align self. So let me go to the CSS file as well as the HTML file, okay, which is this one. So let me show you the Flexbox for this container. Now when I set up the Flexbox display mode for the items inside this container, you can see that the items are simply narrowed down. So what does it mean by this narrowing action? When I use flex, I just want to show all the items along a row, which is my main access direction for this case, because I don't set up the flex direction explicitly. And for this situation, we have to notice that all the items with no fixed size are stretched to the largest height along the cross-axis. So that means for this situation, item 3 is the highest item, and item 1 has to also follow the height of item 3. So that is the meaning of the stretching along the cross-axis. Remember, the cross-axis is simply the vertical dimension, because I already determined the main axis as the horizontal direction. But how about item 2? For item 2, I explicitly set up some height dimension. So in this case, item 2 doesn't need to follow the stretching requirement shown here. Okay, as long as the items have fixed dimensions, they don't need to follow the stretch regulation. Okay, and we have to notice that the stretch is the default value. So what does it mean by that? Let me show you now. So this is the default value of align items. So if I want to align the items by using the stretch mechanism, I can set align items being stretched, or I can even ignore this line as the default value of the align items attribute value pair. So I don't have any change in the effect. At this time, I can also try many values for align items property. So for flex start, you can see that all items will start at the top line. Okay, so this is the starting line for the items. Okay, so similarly, I can use flex end. You can expect that all the items are aligned at the bottom. How about center? For center, you can see that all items are aligned along the center line of all the items. So you can think about a line passing through the middle part of each item. Okay. And how about another one called baseline? Let me try it now. Okay, for baseline, you can see that the items are aligned a bit differently. You can imagine having a horizontal line under the first row of each item. Okay, so you can imagine a horizontal line that passes through item 1 words, item 2 words, and item 3 words. So that is the meaning of the baseline. You can see that I explicitly set up some padding for item 2, so that item 2 words are not aligned with the bottom border so closely. In this case, I can demonstrate the baseline effect more easily. So you can imagine a horizontal line and that is put just below these words, item 1, item 2, and item 3. Okay. So for align item attribute, it is responsible for aligning all the elements inside a container. So if you want to change the alignment for a particular element, how can we do so? We can make use of the align self attribute. Okay, you can see that item 2 is aligned a bit differently. So it is placed in the center of the container. So when I choose the container again, you can see that item 2 is placed in the middle of the container when we consider the vertical dimension of the container. So it is a bit different from the previous setup. So for previous setup, I used the baseline approach so that the item 2 is placed in this way. But when I use align self for this particular element, you can see that this element doesn't need to follow the align items property. It can have its own way of placing the elements. Okay. Another topic to talk about is align content, which is shown here. So for this one, you can see that there is some overlapping of the elements. And you can also see that the container dimension shown by the dotted lines is not able to really contain all the elements from item 1 to item 13. But after some arrangement, I'm able to put these items 1 to 13 inside the container in some way. So let me show you the HTML file, and let me try to add something inside the CSS file. Okay, I can do the Flexbox display mode. So for this case, you can see that all the items 1 to 13 are put on one line because I haven't set up the wrapping. So it is easy to see that there is some overflow outside the container shown by the dashed lines. So you can see that all the items with no fixed size, which are shown here, are stretched to the largest height along the cross-axis. So the largest height along the cross-axis is simply defined by the container dimension, which is 300 pixels. So you can see the stretching. And for now, let me try to do the alignments. So this is the default setting for align items attribute. Okay, so when I use the align content attribute, I'm able to show something more. So for FlexStart being the value of the align content attribute, you can see that the items are just put from the top of the container. Okay, but we have to do something else by including the wrapping property in order to show more. Okay, when I do the wrapping, you can see that the FlexStart effect is more apparent. So the FlexStart is simply saying that the items are put from the top line, and if the end of a certain item is getting close to the container edge, you can do the wrapping so that from item 10 onwards you can see some wrapping. How about using FlexEnd? Yes, for FlexEnd, you can see that the items are trying to be placed at the bottom, which is simply the end line along the cross-axis. Okay. How about center? For center, you can see that the items are trying to be put in the center of the container. Also, we need to follow the wrapping value for the FlexWrap attribute. For space between, you can see that the items 1 to 9 are put very close to the top of the container, while items 10 to 13 are put at the bottom of the container. So we have some space between these two rows of items. And there is no space between the top items and the top container. Also, we don't have any space between the bottom container border and the bottom items. When we use space around instead of space between, you can see that there is also some space between the top container and the top items. Also, we can see some space between the bottom container and the bottom items. So these spaces are calculated by finding out the total height of the items together with the total height of the container. And then we evenly distribute the available space along the cross-axis. Okay, so this part is having a space of this size, and also this part has twice the size of the space shown here. And we have also one more portion of the space at the bottom. So you can see that for each item, there is top space and the bottom space. Same for the items on the second row. So you can see these spaces. So you can also notice that the spaces are evenly distributed at the top and the bottom of the items. That means along the cross-axis, you can see the space is evenly distributed. Okay, let us talk about justify content attribute, which is discussed in this part of the CSS file and this part of the HTML file. So let me try to show the Flexbox first. And we can see that the items are arranged along the main axis for now. And how about using the justify content attribute? I will have some changes to the appearances. So this is just the default value for flex start. You will see that the items don't change its appearance, so that you can think about flex start as the default value of justify content attribute. So we can even ignore this line. So how about the flex end value? Let me try it now. So for flex end, you can see that the items are put closer to the end of the main axis. So you can see the alignment as follows. Item 3, which is the rightmost element, is put very close to the end line of the main axis. How about another value called center? When I put center, you can see that the items are put in the middle of the container. So let me try to show you the container by highlighting it. Yes, after I highlighted the container, you can see that the items are put in the middle of the container. When I use space between, you can see that the spaces are evenly distributed between item 1 and 2 and between item 2 and 3. So you can also see that item 1 has no space with starting line of the main axis, and item 3 has also no space with the end line of the main axis. But when I use space around as the value of the justified content attribute, you can see that item 1 has some space on the left hand side, and also item 3 has some space on the right hand side. And you can see that the space is evenly distributed. So for items 1 and 2, you can see that there are twice the space as the space from the start edge to the item 1. So two portions here, one portion, and one portion here. So for space around, the space distribution is different from the situation of space between value. Okay. Then I'm going to talk about auto margins. So let me go to this part. and the CSS file is this part. Also, the HTML file is this part. So let me try to do the Flexbox for these elements. Okay, and then what does it mean by the auto margins? Let me show you the situation now. Before doing so, I do the conventional justification of the spaces of the items. So you don't see any changes because the flex start is simply the default value of the justified content attribute. But when I want to do some special arrangement of the items, we can make use of the margins. So what does it mean by that? Let us try to concentrate on item 3 first. If I want to put some positive free space to the left of this item, how can I do that? I can make use of the margin property. Okay, when I use margin left auto as the attribute value pair, I can see that for item 3 I have some margins on the left hand side, and the value of the width of the margin is simply calculated by the auto value. So you can see that the space is trying to be distributed between items 2 and 3 completely. And if item 4 wants to have some kind of left margin, how can we do that? We can simply use the command again. So for this situation, you can also see that item 4 has got some left margin, and the dimension for the margin is calculated automatically by means of the auto value of the margin left attribute. So for now, you can see that both items 3 and 4 would have some left margins, and the left margins are of the same size. So the word auto here is simply helping you to calculate the dimensions of the margins automatically. You don't need to really do the calculations yourself in order to put the margins precisely. Okay. The final topic to talk about in this video is the ordering of the items. So let me go to the CSS file and also the HTML file, which is this part. Okay. So you can see that for now, items 1, 2, and 3 are put in order, which is shown on this HTML file. So if I don't decide any order of the items, the default value is simply equal to 0. So how about changing the order of the items? Suppose I want to change item 1 to have another position in the output of the web page. How can I do that? I can use the order attribute. So I want to say item as having an order of 4. And how about items 2 and 3? I can also set up the orders. Now we don't see the effect yet because I haven't set up the order container yet. Let me say the Flexbox first. Okay, after setting up the Flexbox, you're able to see that the items have changed their order according to the orders shown on each item. So order 4, 5, 2 is simply telling you that item 3 should be put in the first part of the Flexbox, because order 2 is the smallest value of all the orders. And you can see that order 4 is larger than order 2, so it is so item 1 is placed next to item 3, and for item 2 it has a largest order, so that it is put on the far right of the Flexbox. Okay, so how about setting up another kind of order? If I put order to be 5 for my item 1, what will happen? Let me see now. So you can see that item 3 is still having the smallest order, so it is put on the far left. And for items 1 and 2, they have the same order. So if the two items have the same order, then we simply follow the HTML source code order. So for the source code here, we can see that item 1 is simply put before item 2. So according to the rule here, we just put item 1 on the left and item 2 on the right in order to follow the order declared inside the HTML file. So this video has already discussed a number of topics of Flexboxes. We have discussed many things like the flex direction, the flex wrapping, the flex flow, which is a shorthand form of flex direction and flex wrap. We also discussed minimum content and maximum content. We also discussed the alignment of items along the main axis as well as along the cross axis. And we also did the justification of the items along the main axis. And we also discussed the auto margins issue. Finally, we have discussed the ordering of the items that are shown on the web page. This is the end of the video. If you have any questions about my video, please leave your questions on the comment section below the video. If you like this video, please give me a like and please subscribe to my channel. Thank you for watching.